This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
Ho, ho, ho. That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10.5, 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah, copy.
Welcome back, podcast listeners. It's great to have you along. Back with Jono Macbeth for part 2 of our chat. As usual, if you haven't already listened to part 1, I strongly advise you give it a listen. Amongst other things, Jono's story about his transition into the sport of sailing is a must-listen tale. It involves a fridge, a kayak shop, and Sir Peter Blake. All true. Give it a listen. Before we get going, you'll have heard in part 1 how Jono's journey in the Cup started back in 2000 in Auckland. The Cup was being sailed in IACC monohulls, the last traditional non-foiling monohulls to appear at the Cup. And his career has seen him sail in some of the craziest yachts the Cup's ever seen. We ended part 1 talking about the 90-foot deed of gift yachts, so pick up the Cup here as Jono prepares for the 2013 San Francisco Cup. Jono hasn't just sailed in the America's Cup though, so we start part 2 with a quick chat about some offshore maxi sailing, during which we hear a rather chilling tale. I had forgotten about the incident Jono tells us about, and I have to say my initial reaction may sound a little flippant. No life jacket, no EPIRB. Jono wasn't even wearing shoes. He tells the story in a rather laid-back way, but there's nothing casual about it. He was incredibly lucky, sailing on a boat packed with accomplished sailors. It is a precautionary tale with a happy ending. But as my new offshore sailing partner Dee Kafari repeatedly states, safety is no accident. Jono won't mind me saying this story sets a very bad example of safety at sea. Before all of that though, if you're enjoying what you hear, then please do head over to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. It's easy to use, I promise, and your support is really appreciated. It allows us to stay ad-free and to keep on delivering these uninterrupted interviews. If you've supported us already, then a huge thanks. If not, give it a go. It's super simple. Right, let's get going. We resume our chat with Jono as we digress slightly into his non-Cup sailing antics before picking things up in San Francisco. I hope you enjoy the time I spent with Jono Macbeth.
By the time I came out, the boat was just completely gone, and I was alone there in the Mediterranean. Watch out, boys! You look out for your mates here. The sound of the wing breaking up around you was just horrendous.
We've talked so far about the Cup, Jono, but you've done plenty of other sailing, haven't you? Especially earlier in your career. What else were you sailing on?
When you started around the ISCC boats and the monohulls, the traditional thing was to go off and do maxi boat sailing, match racing, and really hone those skills off on the off season. And guys, especially when you're sailing out in New Zealand, you would you'd finish sailing up in April and then come up to Europe and sail all the way through to November, go back to New Zealand and start up the campaign again. So I did a lot of sailing on maxis and a lot with Neville Crichton, who had the Shockwave boats, which, we went through quite a few different versions of those, and that was a great boat to sail on and always, just a little bit different from the match racing that you're doing on in the America's Cup.
It's not always that easy getting by offshore, is it? I mean, Alfa Romeo was a big yacht, but you'd not been sailing that long, had you, Jono? I mean, how did you go into your first Fastnet race?
Probably with my eyes shut a little bit, if I'm honest, because when you are match racing and, and around the cans and inshore, it's different, because things are very structured, and then all of a sudden you're going offshore and it's different. and you do need to learn your sea miles and understand, what you can and can't do at different times of night, and you needed to kind of really look after yourself. And I, in the end, I ended up around about 10,000 nautical miles, which I don't think is that much in the grand scheme of things. People have certainly done a huge amount more, but offshore sailing is one of those amazing things where you can just see stuff that you don't normally see in everyday life. And I think that's really special. You see more sunrises and sunsets when you're sailing offshore than I think you do at any other time of your life. And you see some incredible, what nature's all about and what pristine oceans can really look like. And obviously things can, go horribly wrong, which is, I think, where you're getting to.
You did have a bit of a scare, didn't you, with Alfa Romeo? Talk to us about that. What happened there? I mean, I'm right, it was a couple of years later, perhaps, in the Middle Sea race. Yeah,
exactly. We had been, and I was actually trying to remember what year it was the other day, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I think it was somewhere around 2005. And it'd been actually a pretty light air Middle Sea race, and the whole way round, as the crew forward of the mast like to do, we gossip up there, and we were actually talking about whether we would be going pulling out of the race because it was taking too long, And anyway, of course, Neville would have never done that anyway because he had his eyes firmly set on winning that race. And on the last night, we were tracking a storm system, and one of the local guys on the boat was going, this will hit us, And anyway, I'd gone down off watch and kind of, you got the all hands on deck. And so jumped out of my bunk and I was just in my salopettes, had no boots on, and ran up on deck, and we had up the light air code 0, which, 3 or 4 of us filled up. And then by the time we filled it up, and that 0 kind of had a range of up to about 5 to 7 knots. And so the time we filled it up, it was blowing 20. And so it had really come in. It was pitch black. I remember that so clearly. It would gone from this beautiful night just to one of those deep, dark, inky black, Mediterranean nights. And so we filled it up, and then, we all ran up onto the foredeck, and we're just doing a bareheaded change. We're just trying to get it out of the sky. And I was 2 or 3 guys from the front, and so the first kind of zig kind of got laid down, and I remember I had a bare hold on it. I was just hanging onto the sail for dear life, and we were off on a probably an undesirable angle for the guys up on the bow, and the boat was probably doing 25 knots. It's a big, powerful boat. It doesn't take much for it to get going. And anyway, because of the the apparent wind that came over the boat so quickly, that the sail flogged. And I remember hearing the guys behind me go, "Watch out, boys, she's going to go." And I was like, what are they talking about? I've got such a good grip on the sail, it's going nowhere. And lo and behold, I just left the boat because I was, holding on, and I should have let go like everybody else did, And anyway, so I found myself, because, the halyard was down a bit, you end up in the water about 10 feet away from the boat, and then it comes swinging back in, and I'm hanging onto the sail, being dragged along backwards. And I remember looking up at Stu Bentley, the waffler, and he's just staring down at me as if to say, "What are you doing in the water?" I was like, "I agree. What am I doing down here?" And then at that stage, I go to grab the gunnel. I was just going, crikey, I've probably got one shot at this, and I was never going to get it. It was way too high for me. Did that. My salopettes filled up with water under the sail, and pop up probably 20 feet away from the boat. And, the boat's gone. I was doing 25 knots, and I just remember, wow, that's moving in a big hurry. And then the next thing that happened, unfortunately, is because my salopettes filled up with water, I just sunk. And so I had to kick all that off underwater, kind of came up for air, and then by the time I came up, the boat was just completely gone, and I was alone there in the Mediterranean, which is disturbing to say the least. But it was a really interesting time because you've only got two options at that stage. You can panic and use up a lot of energy, or you can, calm yourself down and, just go, rightio, they will come back. And, hopefully things work out for the best. And I remember I had a good old panic attack, and then I just went, no, come on, this will be all right. They've got the man overboard buttons and all that kind of stuff, and they'll come back to you. And so after about 15 minutes, they turned around and they start coming back, and I can see the riding light. I'm going, okay, this is going to be fine, and heading straight towards me. And when they're about 50 meters away, they started veering off, going to the position where I fell off the boat. And because the waves were so big now and the wind was so strong, I drifted quite a bit to leeward, a lot faster than they thought. And that's when I panicked. I was like, oh, they don't know where I am. And so I waited until they were the closest angle I thought they were going to get to me. And I just started screaming as loud as I can. And, you'd think on a boat of that size and with the technology there, they would have something pretty cool to find somebody who had been lost overboard. But in reality, they all had dolphin torches, like where were the torches, and they were just shining them around the ocean. And by luck, they picked me up, and the boys reckoned I was out of the water up to my waist, And so, yeah. And so, after a little bit of a kerfuffle, I got back on board. And actually, then I went downstairs and I made a, you go into a little bit of shock and you want to be around people. So I was like, okay, boys, I'll make you a cup of tea. And I just managed to boil the kettle and get everything, laid out. And the boat was laid over on its side by, the pure front, which was 70 knots. So, gosh, if they hadn't found me when they did, there was no way they would have found me after that. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness, I feel panic just thinking about it. So you're in the water with obviously no life jacket, no EPIRB, no torch, no nothing.
And there's some really good lessons for young sailors there. And it's funny. I haven't really spoken about a huge amount, but when I have, it comes back to consequences. And actually, I feel pretty guilty, not for myself, but actually the danger I put the rest of the crew in. And the consequences of your actions of, coming up on deck, thinking, oh, she'll be right. I didn't have my sea boots on. I didn't put my life jacket on. And that could have been really bad for a lot of people, because actually I put the whole crew in risk because they were now trying to maneuver this really big boat to try and find me. And there was no real reason for it. It's, so yeah, that's offshore sailing for you. It is one of those, again, it's a different part of our sport and one that doesn't naturally cross over, I don't think, from, match racing to offshore to even catamaran sailing at times.
Did it put you off offshore sailing?
No, it didn't. It makes you better, doesn't it? Because it makes you think. It actually makes you more aware of what could go wrong. And so I think you just become a better sailor for it. It's a tough lesson to learn and a silly one, but there you go.
All right, I don't want to talk about that anymore. I sail offshore double-handed. It's sort of it's the worst case scenario. We're not going to talk about that. Let's get back to Cupland, Jono. Things were getting pretty exciting again. By the 2013 Cup in San Francisco, you stayed with Oracle. Things were progressing fast, weren't they? It felt like a real development race. The boats were to be 72 foot long. What was the feeling in Oracle as rumours from New Zealand were that the Kiwis were running a fully foiling package?
Well, I think, again, this was an amazing time in our sport. It's changed completely. And it did feel like a different sport altogether. We'd gone from, back in 2007, these mono hulls, and, yes, we'd gone off and done the deed of gift in between, Valencia and San Fran, but, here we were and basically purpose designed mat racing catamarans that, as you saw, as we all saw, New Zealand took into foiling straight off the bat. And you know what, it was a really interesting time, because we were learning to sail our 72 in San Fran Bay, which is, anyone who sailed there is just, it's I'm not going to say nasty place, it's just a very intense place to sail.
Unforgiving.
Very unforgiving is a great way of putting it. And so it was amazing. It was the wild, wild west of sailing at that time, especially, as we developed these big boats. And like you say, in New Zealand, we were off foiling around and we were seeing this footage coming out of New Zealand, and almost in a little bit of, disbelief. But also, again, I think you look at your opposition and you learn from them, but at the same time, you've got your head down and you're going, rightio, we're down this path. And a lot of our boat, I think, was, optimized to winning, which is effectively what we saw in the end. And, we were probably a little bit too extreme right at the beginning. And, I think Team New Zealand they started at the other end of the spectrum and we converged there in the middle of, the regatta essentially, and then crossed over a little bit. Eventually.
Talk us through those pioneering days on San Francisco Bay with the weighing on the AC-72, learning, as you say, learning to sail in one of the most unforgiving places on the planet. Well,
yeah, exactly. And we didn't do a fantastic job of it, to be fair, did we? What was it, day 7 or day 8, we pitch poled, and again, we were learning to run before we probably could walk, but that's also kind of probably that's San Fran for you, isn't it? Because you go out sailing there and you are in 25 knots just about every single day. And I do remember the day we capsized, as I'm sure a lot of people do, so vividly. It was, it was blowing, the tide was running. And on top of all of that, we had these straight L foils in the boat that we were struggling to control. We just didn't have the control systems like they had, or they have now. And we've done a couple of laps around Alcatraz, and I'd already been on the cockpit floor because that was my go-to safe place. I'd fall to the ground and hang on to the cockpit. And the trouble was we were getting too much lift out of the foils, as I recall, and the boat would launch up out of the water and then we'd do these massive sideways kind of slides, and then it'd crash back down, and then, Jimmy's trying to get control of the boat again, and, things were just moving so quickly. And so we'd done a couple of these laps of Alcatraz, and things were pretty hairy. And so as we came back around the bottom, they were having a chat about what we should do next. And, there's a lot of backwards and forwards going on, and good discussions, because, if you just go in every time, things get a bit difficult, especially with a new boat, and, like when things are getting tough, you'll never get through anything. So, you've got to, take advice from everybody. And then in the end, the call was, okay, hang on, we need to go in because, we don't have a good grip on this. The conditions are getting pretty extreme. Come on, let's go home. Now, unfortunately, at that stage, we're just past the top of Alcatraz, and the only way to get home is to bear away and to get out of there. And so we start the bear away, and we're trimming on the main, and there's this, there's an acceleration kick as everything kind of attached. And I was like, whew, that's a good one. And then we trimmed it on again, and it was just this really, slow, powerful bear away, and then it just kicked again. And I went, oh, that doesn't feel great. And I remember in that stage, Jimmy quite, I think it's not famously, but I remember him just clear as day going over the comms. Watch out, boys, you look out for all your mates here. And I was going, what on earth is he talking about? And next minute, bang, the bows go under, and I was second cockpit back with Rome Kirby and Joey Newton, and we just went underwater. Like the boat, we were just like the bows were underwater, and we were underwater for a wee while.
What's a wee while?
When your heart rate's that high, anything above a couple of seconds. But the boat, it just kept on driving down, and then up she goes, and and you pop out of the water as the boat, the nose comes out, and the wing goes into the water, and we're over vertical. So everyone was kind of wanting to fall out of the cockpits, and the sound of the wing breaking up around you was just horrendous. It was just like, what happens next? And I think a lot of us were expecting the main spar to break, and that's when things get really dangerous, because the platform folds on top of each other. But very thankfully that didn't happen. But then it was a case of everyone, getting off the boat, getting into chase boats, getting counted. And it was one of those things that you just never ever want to experience, and there wasn't a remote bit of fun about it. And then after that, you have to try and clean up the mess, and that, as we've all seen, it was again probably decisions made theoretical that you thought would work just didn't work at all. And you're dealing with, max currents and tidal flows and a lot of breeze. And unfortunately, the boat got swept out underneath the bridge, and, it took quite a bit of to damage. But, maybe in looking back at this, and, I've never spoken to Jimmy about it or some of the other guys, but that could have been a really defining moment of that campaign that made everyone sit up and think, actually, we need to beyond it. We really need to make sure that our decisions from here on in are the right ones. And in the end, it was a good campaign. It was a tough one, and it certainly wasn't easy. And oddly, the campaigns that have been the hardest have been the ones that I've done the best in. The fun ones never really seem to work out that well. It was it was a crazy time. And I remember when we relaunched and we had made some modifications, we'd stiffened up the boat, it felt completely different and a lot more controllable. But still, we had a long, long way to go at that stage.
There was quite a few guys on that boat, Jono. I mean, the afterguard clearly had a lot on. And we've spoken to Jimmy Spittle about it, to Kyle Langford, to Ben Ainsley also about, learning to sail these boats. What about for you guys? You're on the platform, doing your job, grinding away. How much trust do you have to have that they're going to get it right all the time?
The guys at the back, you've got to put all your trust into them, but you've got to put all your trust into everybody on the boat, don't you? That's what being in a true team sport's all about, is trusting your teammates and knowing that they'll make the best decision that they think they can make. And it's sometimes those decisions are right and sometimes they're not right. Sometimes they just get it wrong. But again, you've just got to accept those decisions that, okay, well, that's what they decided to do and they've got a reason for that, and get on and do your job. But I think that's in these big team sports, that's what it's all about. It's about doing your job as well as you can do, and understanding that everyone else is doing that around you as well, and not interfering in something that's you've got nothing to do with, because that just becomes noise. And then if you're actually having an input into something that you shouldn't do, that you're not doing your job as well as you should do. So it's and that went from the monohulls all the way through to the catamarans. But I guess the big change for all of the crew on the catamarans is how athletic it got all of a sudden. We used to call ourselves sportsmen, but we really weren't. And then all of a sudden we're thrust into this world, and the evil hydraulic accumulator turned up, and you're pumping oil around the boat, and the sport was completely different in that respect. You went, and luckily enough, the position I was in was split kind of 50-50 between actually, trimming the wing on, so you could feel what was going on to, grinding oil, which, if anyone hasn't done it, I promise you it's not that enjoyable looking at a light and just going, I need to get that, that pressure up to 90% before the next manoeuvre.
I suppose what I was getting at was the guys in the back now had an added responsibility, because actually it's potentially quite dangerous. And it wasn't long after that, of course, that tragically Andrew Simpson lost his life when Artemis broke up out on the bay. If you look back now, obviously just within your team at Oracle, how naive do you think everyone was to the dangers of sailing at this level?
Yeah, I think we definitely were. We were learning a new sport, like I said before, and so after the capsize that we had, I think that gave everyone a good shake up. And I remember all of a sudden the safety protocols got stepped up hugely, and we did have processes that were put in place. And, we spoke about, how to right a boat or when not to right it. And I think it actually went through every aspect of the team. I remember even, lifting a wing, and there's some pretty horrific footage of other teams, where the wings got out of control and people were flying around. And, there weren't many aspects of these boats that weren't really dangerous. And so it was just a good wake-up call for everybody that actually, we do need to take this seriously and make sure that you follow, the procedure and what had been put in place. Because when things go wrong, it went wrong really quickly. You were up against the wall and it was fight or go home. The Mod America's Cup is full of some pretty big players and some pretty amazing regattas.
Let's talk about AC34, the much discussed San Francisco Cup. We've spoken to plenty of protagonists on this podcast, but Jono, I wonder from your perspective, what was that like, going 8-1 down against Team New Zealand, one race away from defeat? As a grinder, is there anything you can be doing, anything that you debrief on, or is it all just within the afterguards? And how the races are being lost, how involved in all of that were you guys on the handle?
Wow, yeah, this was one of those amazing regattas. It was something, that I certainly hadn't been involved in, and I don't suspect many people before me had been or will after. It was incredible, and it started off that we had the build up, and we're not going to go into that, but it was such a relief to actually get out racing. And I remember the first weekend, and even though things hadn't gone incredibly well, it was still, I was just going, this is just so much fun. We're out there, we're racing, and as a team, you go in there and you're debriefing, and you debrief together, and you're trying to figure out, what's going well, what's not going well, where your strengths, where your weaknesses are. And I think from a team perspective, you're all in it together. So, whether you're in the afterguard or you're in the front of the boat, you've got to do your job to the best of your ability, because that's all anyone can ask of you. And that's what's really important. So I think, everyone's got their role to play. And, you look at some of the early racing, and we were having quite a lot of trouble tacking. I think our upwind speed was, is okay, but it was appalling when we tacked. We were just losing so much. And so, that was something that we needed to change, and we needed to change it in a pretty big hurry. And also, and then, we had the setup of the boat and a few mode changes that needed to be made. And that's when we called that lay day, and that's when the big changes really came about, and obviously the big one, Ben came on board for JK. But also the next day during the lay day, we went out there and we really practiced our upwind mode, and tried to, we really started down this road of upwind foiling, of basically having to, bear away, build the speed up and then start coming back up on the wind, which sounds really basic now, but back then was this, jeepers, are you sure? This seems like we're going to give away quite a lot of ground. And if it doesn't work, it's just a loss. But tied into all of that was really the increasing the camber down low and reducing the centre of gravity on the wing, which allowed us to upwind foil with more stability. So again, we went out there the following day after that lay day, and we still didn't win. Again, the races kept on ticking away at us until it was, like you say, 8-1. And what an absolutely fantastic position to be in. I thought it was great, and I'm not just saying that. I was having a ball, and I think everyone around us was as well. This was good fun, like it was, you were up against the wall and it was, fight or go home. And the team really came together, probably more than I think it ever had done in the last, 2 or 3 years. We just gelled in every aspect. And from there, it's just a case of, I think, a culmination of really, a great team that just pulled it together at the right time. Talk about peaking at the right time. It was pretty impressive. So it was interesting. After that regatta, I remember speaking to some of my friends on Team New Zealand, and they just went, God, that was tough, wasn't it? Because it was a long regatta. It went on for 3 weeks. And they go, we're tired and we've got injuries. And I was like, no, what are you talking? We had this abundance of energy during the regatta. I remember quite clearly crossing the finish line and just going, I am exhausted. And I think that was it. Because I remember waking up every morning and just going, I've got to go to work. This is awesome. We get another day to try and fight back. And I think you carry that positive energy when you're on a roll like that. And I guess they were experiencing the negative aspect of that, which must have been really difficult to deal with.
What are your memories sailing out for that final day of racing, knowing it was all or nothing, having done so well to get to 8-all? It was, well, exactly. At that stage, I think anyone kind of in those really big sporting events and being involved in like a major sporting event is unbelievable. The atmosphere everywhere is just incredible, and it's like I say, if you could replicate that every time you race, I think you're certain to win. You just get this this incredible buzz and energy. Now, and I know that Jimmy's spoken about this already. We're going, you have this big hype and you go, come on, we're going to go out there and we're going to do it. And, we know the process. We just got to keep doing the same thing and we'll be okay. And lo and behold, we're sailing and something falls out of the mast and the warm up. And I think it's a very well told story that, flap 2, hinge point was, destroyed itself. And I think the interesting thing there is that, the shore crew came alongside, we had the chase boats there, and they sent, Jeff Causey up the rig and he's fixing it. And everybody on board just tried to pretend like everything was normal. And we had 2 sets of, guys on, one on the leeward and, the afterguard up to weather, and they're talking tactics, and the guys down below were talking about, what we're going to be doing and making sure that, everyone was on the same page. And at the same time, carbon dust is blowing over and you can hear the grinder up the wreck. And it was just like, oh dear. And at that stage though, it's just about, mental toughness, isn't it? You're just putting that aside and go, oh, well, we can only control what we can control here. And, as I think, as Jeff left the boat, Jimmy said, what can we
is there anything we can and can't do? And he goes, just go easy, for the first 5 minutes. And, we instantly bore away and we're doing, 35 knots down the course. And so, it was funny though. I didn't actually think about that until after the race. And, so you go through and, you're doing your race and you're just trying not to think of the finish. You're just got to focus in on what, is the next jibe, the next tack. And I remember we came along the final reach and we only had 10 or 20 meters to go. And I was in a cockpit with Joey Newton and Rome Kirby, and I look at Joey, who was a really good friend, and he starts smiling and I started smiling back, and Rome, the young one, he's going, "Stop it, you two." And I was going, "I think we're right. I think we're going to do it." Then just the elation as he crossed the line, I'll never forget that feeling. It's amazing. And it'd been 13 years since the last time I'd won the cup in a multi-challenge series. So it was a special day for me, especially too because that was the first time in my position I'd won in the team, and so it was if you could bottle that feeling.
And done it the hard way, hadn't you? I mean, it must have, collectively as a team, it must have been extraordinary, that win. Yeah,
it really was. And it was definitely not the easy route or the way you want to go about it. But it was, it was great. I remember Johnny Wilkinson talks about that very famous World Cup they won in rugby. And he made that drop kick. And then, the final whistle goes and he goes, if I could just pause time at that moment, everything would be complete. Because he knew that for every minute that passed from when that whistle go, the feeling would diminish of the victory and of winning. And I never really understood it until you're in that position. And he's dead right. It's an amazing feeling. And, you can look back and later in life and you're still proud and you remember it. But that moment of just, God, we've done it, is amazing.
From a career perspective, winning the cup in Auckland must be up there. But coming back from such a defeat to win in San Francisco, where does that rank amongst your achievements, do you think?
I think for me, like the win in San Fran was kind of definitely the pinnacle. It kind of probably the culmination, the peak of my career, and a lot had gone into that, physically and mentally, and the skills that you'd learnt along the way. It just all came together, and it was, like I say, it was a tough campaign. It was so tough. It's not your traditional team either. It was quite a dysfunctional team, and we'd had a lot of adversity, and there'd been a lot of things that had gone wrong. And so to overcome all of that and just keep pushing and just knowing that if you just kept on working hard, you would get there. It was, it was great.
You beat Team New Zealand. And for Dolts, for Dean Barker, that was a tough loss, wasn't it? You'd left Team New Zealand after 2007. Can you explain that? There's very much a fortress mentality within Team New Zealand. You were in the team, you've left, you've sailed for other teams, beaten Team New Zealand even. So did that mean that then is the door shut for you and Team New Zealand? Describe how that is.
It's funny. Like I said kind of earlier on, there is no friends out on the water, is there? You're competitors, and everyone at that level is a competitor, so they completely understand. But there's a lot of friends in that team, and there still are a lot of friends, and I think there's respect, and it's tough. Like you saw those guys on the dock, you go and shake their hands, and you can see the pain was everywhere, and you don't want to see anybody like that, but there's nothing you can do about it because that's the sport and that's the game that you're in. So, and hey, they came back pretty strong after that, if we're honest, and look where they are now. And that's life sometimes, isn't it? And they, they're all an incredible campaign and could have gone either way. But there's been some, there's good rivalries there, Oracle and Team New Zealand and Alinghi Team New Zealand. It's the Mod America's Cup is full of some pretty, big players and some pretty amazing regattas.
Well, that cup in 2013, you won with Oracle in San Francisco, sailing with Ben Ainsley, of course. And shortly after that cup win, he was on the phone. What was your next big career move? Well,
so after it's interesting, after Oracle and after that 2013 cup, it's time really to take a bit of a breath, isn't it? And have a look at where you want to go. And the boats were changing, dramatically, and I was getting older, and you've got to be very careful in the sport, especially when it's changing like that. Like it's like my position wasn't as a helmsman or a tactician where you can, eke out a few more years. As the boats became more physical, age unfortunately does have a pretty dramatic effect. So Ben and I had actually spoken a little bit, and San Fran, and I don't think anybody was surprised that he had ambitions to run his own sailing team and to do things the way he wanted to do. And it was I think it was a bit of a natural progression. During that San Fran regatta, I'd been taking on a little bit more of the sailing team manager role and working with Jimmy there. And after the 2013 Cup, there was a lot of uncertainty about Oracle and which way it was going to go. And so it just felt, again, like a time to make another change. And, I thought what Ben was doing was, super exciting, and who would turn down that offer? It all looked like a very viable cup contender. BAR back then, you had some Formula One influence, you had a budget, a good cause, you won the World Series, of course. What was the feeling in the team as the cup approached? I think, the great thing about, BAR and, and being at a British team is there's so much history there, and the overwhelming feeling from everybody in that team was, we want to bring the cup back to Britain. And it's not a catchphrase. It's what everybody wants truly to happen, and it would be amazing. It's like a fairy tale. It would be like England winning the Football World Cup again, except in the sailing world, it would be even bigger because it's the first time. And so as we approached, we'd been in isolation down here in the Solent, and so we didn't really have a true understanding of how dire our situation was. We'd gone really well in the World Series, so we knew that we could, from a sailing skill ability, we were just fine. And so it was it was a tough time up in Bermuda. We got up there and we were clearly off the pace. And the difficult thing with these boats is the lead time on a lot of the key components is so long that the die's cast, a long time before race day. And so it was it was a tough end to a really good campaign. It seems from the outside like you built a lot of test boats at BAR. How hard was it getting a fully foiling 50-foot monohull race ready? And as sailing team manager, what sort of decisions were having to be made? I think, again, that was we were almost penalised for being off the mark too early, because we were quite a way into our first test boat when they changed the rules. And again, this comes down to, making decisions, not your first mistake that you make, but potentially it's your second one that you really pay for. And so, as we, as that cup progressed, you're right, we probably just were too ambitious on what we did. And I guess there's probably, a few shadows left over from that 2003 campaign now, where I look and just go, gosh, we made, the same mistakes again. And, unfortunately, there was a lot of clever people, and sometimes you just get it wrong, and it was certainly that was the case. And as that campaign progressed, and I guess my role within the team was to guide the sailors and try and push them in the directions which we were thought the right ones to go. But I think also interestingly, we were seeing another big shift in the boats. And if we thought the AC-72 was technical, these AC-50s were, again, like you went to them, you're just going, well, back in the old days, you'd go, I'm going to go service a winch, or, like I'll work on in the rigging department. Now it was hydraulics and computers. Like you were looking for people who, could code and were, high-level engineers. So I think this is, the sport's going through some pretty significant changes at this time. And, I'm not saying that's why we ended up where we did, but it's definitely a factor for what happened.
You got to Bermuda, and as you said, pretty early, you could sense that you were off the pace. What was the feeling in the team at that point? How difficult was that time?
Yeah, it was tough. It was a tricky old time. No one likes to lose. And also too, there's a lot of people in that team who had come, from winning teams. So all of a sudden to be experiencing that, and maybe experiencing losses like that for the first time is tough. And I think also the teams that had been out in Bermuda, you had Oracle and Artemis and Team Japan, they learned a lot from each other. And they were, again, because we'd been in isolation a little bit, we probably didn't understand what was really going to be important, coming into Bermuda. And they had done so much racing, and they understood how much energy was used and how important it was to get up on the foils early and all those sorts of things. And so, it was certainly not an easy time.
There was much chat after Bermuda about the New Zealand cyclists, wasn't there? And I want to ask you this question. And while it's important to say that's not what won them the cup, I did want to ask, as one of the sport's most experienced grinders, you're a fully paid up member of the Grinders Union, Jono. What was your thought, or what was the thought amongst all of you? What did all the grinders all think about the cycler approach?
Well, I think the interesting thing is, like you say, there was a huge amount made about that. But I think you take the cyclors in isolation, it didn't win, but it did allow Team New Zealand to put so much more into their boat, which ended up as a package was incredibly, incredibly strong. Now, it wasn't a new idea either, though. This is the thing, and it was a really sensible idea. And we had talked about it, and I'll put my hand up. I was one of the people who was just like, don't think that's going to work. I can think of 1,000 reasons. And again, the sport was changing, and maybe I wasn't quick enough to pick up on that. And I'm not saying that I was the sole reason that it didn't happen in any shape or form, but I think these are times where you need to adapt. And you've seen the good guys out there, and you look at the helmsmen, and you got Jimmy and Dean and Ben. These are guys that have crossed over, and they've gone from slow boats to fast boats, and they're still at the top. And I guess that shows how good they all really are. They are the top of our sport. And I think that's a really exciting thing about these guys and this current bunch of sailors that are out there, is that they are so adaptive and they think differently. And it's it's exciting. That was a pretty cool cup in Bermuda. There was a lot of different ways of approaching the same problem. You had Artemis with a really unique drivetrain for their hydraulics. You had the cyclors. You had Oracle with a more traditional but an incredible foil package, and it was interesting.
It was all change after Bermuda with Ainsley's team. A new investor in Jim Ratcliffe, Ineos of course. Grant Simmer came in, but in the build-up to Auckland, you left the team. How hard was that, Jono? The Cup taking place in your hometown, and suddenly you're not there.
It's certainly not the not the end of my career that I was kind of hoping for. I guess everyone has that fairy tale dream. So yeah, it was really tough. But in fairness, it was the right time to get out. I think again, the sport had moved on, and you, from me, like I was the physical attributes that these young guys have got are just phenomenal. It's just amazing to see how fit they are, how much power they can put out. And I just don't think there's any room on any team for somebody who's not at that level. And so it was, it's tough. It's always tough to watch. And but it's good. And it led on to new and more exciting horizons for me at the moment. But I suspect it's, I think many sportsmen probably go through that kind of reflective part of their careers, don't they, when they give up, and whether it's to watch an Olympic Games that you're not involved in, or a World Cup final in rugby or football. It's it's tough, and I think it's also it's funny as when you're earlier on in your career, you look at the greats and you hear the story about Michael Jordan and how he he could never give up, and you're just going, oh, why? Why would you not just give up? Enjoy it, sit back, relax. When you're there, you can see why, chasing that last cup, chasing that last time you hear that, that final gun go, that's powerful. It is a little bit like a drug, and there's nothing else like, that feeling when you win a major sporting event. It's incredible. And so you do keep on looking for it.
Looking back, Jono, you've been on some incredible boats, skippered by some absolute legends of the sport. Peter Blake, Russell Coates, Jimmy Spittle, Ben Ainsley. You even put up with me for a while on the Extreme Sailing series. I'm not pleased that you're laughing.
I think it's the other way around.
That is going back some. But who gets your votes in an all-time poll, the best skipper ever?
Oh, I did not think you were going to ask me this question. I think they're all different. I'm going to be very diplomatic on this one. They all come with a different set of skills and way they approach things. And I can name, positives and negatives about all of them. I think, Russell he was incredible, back in that 2000 Cup. He was, so focused, and, he understood the entire package, and he knew how to put it together. And, there's no mistaking that's where and why he is where he is today. He's leading our sport now. But yeah, there's, Dean, Jimmy, Ben, they all have different qualities, don't they? I don't even need to put those. I can see what you're doing, and I'm not going to take the bait.
That's a terrible answer, Jono Macbeth. Come on, if you're to get on a boat tomorrow with one of them, who would it be?
Shirley, it would be you.
I somehow don't think that's true. I mean, Jono, as we said right at the very start, you're now at North Sails, and a very different outlook, running the sustainability programme. How much of a challenge, how much of a change is all of that?
Oh, a huge change. And it's an exciting change, though. And it was something that I've always been really passionate about. And I guess my passion was really ignited in those BAR days, because we had such a strong sustainability initiative that ran the whole way through that team. And I thought it was fantastic to see a sports team take that on and to really promote it, to sponsors, but also to the fans and get it out there. So I think with, joining North Sails, it's such a unique and exciting company to be involved in. The exciting thing for me is I'm still part of the sailing industry, but just far enough removed from it that, it's not kind of like in my face all the time. But, the challenges that we've got in the marine industry at the moment are pretty vast, and we can see the effects of climate change. And I don't think it's good enough for, big companies just to sit back and go, oh, we'll tackle that, next year or whatever. And that's what's exciting about Norths is there's this really, passionate, vibe that's coming down from, the management and they're wanting to make a change and they're wanting to do things better. So
it doesn't always sit with good profit margins, does it? I mean, how much of a challenge is that, changing people's minds in the boardroom?
It doesn't always have to be a negative effect on the profit margin, and it's just a change set. It's just a different way of approaching things. And I guess that's what we saw, as we went from, the IACC boats through to the foiling boats. It was just a change in mindset on how we sailed. And this is, I think, sustainability and that's how it's going to have to be approached in the corporate world is, what may have been the norm, in the past is going to have to change if we're going to make, strides to make this place a better place for, the coming generations. Because, we've got to make some pretty big, significant changes if it's going to be as amazing as it is for us, in the future for our kids.
Jono, you've had an incredible career, multiple cup campaigns, multiple cup lifts. It's been an amazing journey. What do you think that the young Jono Macbeth would have thought back in that kayak shop if you told him what kind of career he'd have ahead of him?
I don't think I would have believed me. It's been a really privileged career, and it's something I never took for granted as I went along my journey. And I knew, as a sportsman, it's always going to end. It can't carry on. And so I really tried to make the most of it along the way. And you're right, it's been amazing. And I think the one thing that you have to do, and even, as for the young sailors out there, you just need to make sure you really enjoy those opportunities that you get and enjoy your success, because you never know when the next one is and how far away it will be.
Good advice. Jono Macbeth, it's been fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very wise words from the very accomplished, multiple America's Cup winner, Jono Macbeth. Enjoy your success. Jono, a big thanks for sitting down to record the podcast. I'm glad we made it happen. Thank you so much. We love to hear from you. So let me know what you think. Like, review and subscribe on whatever platform you join us on. And if you've not done so, buy us a coffee if you've enjoyed the pod. buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. It's easy to do and helps keep us free of any intrusive random ads. To Tim at Vertigo Films, a big thanks for all your hard work making the podcast happen. Tim, as ever, a giant thank you. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there. Gaining on the lane line
We're
there.
looking at 10-5 and 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah. Copy.
This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.